Where we pull away from everyone else that has lots of data about businesses is we invite the end user to come in and clean up their data, because one of the big challenges that's fueling this issue with small businesses, their data is inherently unreliable and inherently untidy. They don't spend enough time. So in our world, you clean up your business, which is all the public information about you, and you only have to do it once. That's our promise to you. Do it once, and then we will republish your clean data on your behalf into all the other environments that you need it to do. Number one. The second thing that we do is we give you a private vault, which is one of the most secure out there, to keep your non-public artifacts, so your tax returns and all those other things that you're constantly asked for over and over again, the 17 and a half days. You do it once, and you don't have to do it again, and we will prompt you when it's time to update those things. So that allows businesses, big and small, to connect with each other on our platform in a secure way, where they can interact with verified businesses across the globe. We're starting in the United States, and then we have an international, our data is international, but our operations are starting in the United States and then fanning out everywhere else. We also are the only business that allows real-time monitoring between counterparties, which again addresses many of the pain points that they're dealing with today. And then last but not least, on payments, we're a little heretical. Our payment strategy, with the way we run our business, is to basically have no cost payments between parties, zero cost. That's sort of a starting place. From there, we move through a few iterations and eventually are at transaction level financing and factoring, which is a huge source of liquidity challenges for businesses.
Excellent. So when you're thinking about the data is a huge issue, obviously, in industry, and it gets very stale very quickly, and there's a lot of point solutions out there, and of course, history doesn't pay the bills or show creditworthiness. Having come from Square, obviously, we did a lot of lending on for future sales and just the very short-term cash flow, and there's other people out there that do that. What would you say, obviously that serves a very specific marketplace. It doesn't lend itself to everyone. For Barry, what would you say would be, the biggest pain point, and from your perspective for Tribal, of making sure people understand what credit they're entitled to and how to maximize and understand what they should be doing with it?
Yeah, I think, for us, to successfully lend in the SME space, we need to, manage credit losses. And as I mentioned earlier, they're traditionally high in this market. And, the way that we can do that is by just having better insights into business, because we want to be able to provide credit at a reasonable rate, not a rate that, is just going to break them essentially. So, that's really our mission, is to, provide credit that's affordable. And in order to do that, we need to be able to, predict a successful business. So, there's a few different sort of novel approaches we've taken with AI to build some scores that are essentially predictive of a small business's strength and maybe even more importantly, a small business's potential. And of course that, relies on data. And, the universe of data that is available is rapidly evolving. There's many new things coming along, and you're right, there's a lot of providers, and it can, the API writing team is very busy, right, because there's just so many different things that we can connect to. And it sounded like your solution is, we were talking before this, sounds, really interesting. But I think that's it, is that, if we can transmit to the customers that, the more we know about you, the more we can help you. And I think there's a bit of a gap that you need to bridge as far as that trust. People don't want to give their, credentials, right? Because that's very private information. And in some of the markets where we operate, there's, less trust in banking in general. So I think that's what we need to, kind of continue to do with, other products that are in the market to kind of build people's trust. I think in the US, we sort of take it for granted, Plaid, everyone's, linking their bank accounts, and, that's something that's not as ubiquitous in other markets. And for us to get to that data so that we can continue to use, data science to essentially predict, better businesses and lend them money and help them grow.
Excellent. So I know, Hani, a lot of what you're doing is helping people consolidate, get all those things together, maybe get a holistic picture of their data and have some of those aha moments. Can you speak a little bit more to, about, what would be if someone's using Market as the best way possible, what would be their expected outcome?
Sure. So a couple of things. In addition to cleaning up your data, adding your non-public artifacts, and I'll talk about the trust equation because you both mentioned it's very important. But there's another seminal point here for this whole conversation, and that is the black box formula that everybody uses. Everybody relies on my black box, my proprietary algorithms. I want to outdo the other guy. I want to be better than the other guy. That's what's causing the 17 and a half days pain point for the end users, having to resubmit and re-provide their data, and never really seeing the benefit of cleaning it once and keeping it clean at the point. So let me know more. Our process is about allowing you to do it once, and then whether you're working with a provider A or B, it's the same clean data, and you can simply push it to them. So in our world, the ideal user and their expected outcome looks something like this. You come to us through one of three ways. An enterprise sends you to us, one like Tribal or JP Morgan Chase or someone else sends you to us, says go to Marquez, clean up your data, and then they'll send you back to me when you're complete, when your file is complete. We do that, we take care of all that messy stuff better than anybody else. That's one way. So that addresses part of the trust equation because you've been sent there by somebody you want to do business with. The second way you come to us is you find us directly. And the third way, the one we're most excited about, is called Meet Me on Marquez, where someone on the platform who's using it invites their counterparts to come meet them on the platform. It should only take you 3 to 5 minutes to claim your record, clean it up, and get going on the platform. So the ideal case is you come through one of those three channels. Doesn't matter which way you come. You get your own personal dashboard for all of this. So you actually you get your own command center for your business. You get to link whatever accounting software or spreadsheets, whatever else you're using on the platform. You get to link all your sources of funding. I don't want to call them bank accounts. It could be multiple different things: crypto, fiat, non-fiat currencies, loyalty points, etc. All rolled up under one staging layer. And you get to connect up your CRM, your social media, whatever else you care about. So you get your individual bespoke dashboard as a business. And then from there, you can either go out to providers of services through a couple of questions. What are you looking for and what are you trying to do? Or you can be proactively approached, not based on advertising and advertising revenue. We have none in our P&L whatsoever. And are invited. So someone like Tribal says, you know, you look like you're a good fit for this product or that product, etc., etc. So that's the ideal use case, and then you opt in or opt out of those suggestions, and then you can push your credentials, whether it's your tax returns or financial information or linkages to your accounting software or whatever, exclusively under your control to those providers, and get literally the best possible solution and the quickest solution to what you're looking for on the platform. Then in terms of paying and getting paid, you get to do that frictionlessly on the platform without any expense in real time.
That's great. And obviously you get that data collected the first time, and some people feel that relief that, oh, I'm up to speed, I've got everything done, and then tomorrow it's not valid anymore. So tell me a little bit about, certainly on Barry's side, you're going to get this clean data or whatever data set, if you're not so lucky to get it from Marquez, getting it from somewhere else. What's the idea of how you can maintain and care and feeding of that data, and constantly training your model to make sure that you're adjusting, like someone who put in their data on March 3rd, 2020 versus they forgot to update it. Obviously, 2 months later, it's a whole different story. How do you feel about making sure that data doesn't stay stale and your models can learn?
Yeah, very, very valid point. So obviously, for us being a lender and an expense platform and payments provider, it's not just one decision. It's not just when they come to us. We certainly decide to approve them as a customer. We give them a credit line, but that decision is really only good for a pretty short period of time. Things can change pretty rapidly in the world of a small business. So for us, equally as important, and I might even say more important, is our ability to monitor. And so once they're our customer, we obviously have a richer set of data. We see where they're transacting, we see how they pay, if they're sloppy or not. But then we also have other means. There's just a lot of data integrations that are becoming available. In Latin America, there's tax authorities that allow you to kind of bring in the data. You can see the invoices that they've been sent. Obviously, open banking, it's nascent in Latin America, but open banking would give us the opportunity to see how their bank balances are moving, and even other things that I'm sure Marquez is probably involved in too, as far as seeing their revenue sources and all of that. So I think it's just striving always for just getting as much data as possible, and then like you said, let the data science do the work. I can then start to consume that, see what's working out from a predictive standpoint. So you're never finished. I'd say it's constantly learning and constantly kind of finding the new sources and the ways to consume that data.
Great. I know. You brought up questions at the end there. Sorry. I know that from my experience with SMB lending, a lot of times people do a lot of shopping, so they'll get one deal, then they'll get a nice little tickler from Cabbage or someone else that's not in the room right now, and they'll say, "Oh, I want that deal too," and they'll go ahead and do that, and then now they're kind of blowing the model. How do you think about retaining and creating return business on your own platforms? Obviously, you're just originating, but how do you feel about in the industry around keeping that kind of seepage and the additional exposures that bring? And how do you guys address thinking about that?
Yeah, just from our perspective, we offer more than just credit and payments. It's also an expense management platform. So really, for these smaller businesses that don't have the sophistication of a CFO and an entire accounting operation, it really helps them do the expense management. It allows them to spin up unlimited virtual cards with various limits and so on. So there's a stickiness to that, right? We really become ingrained in their operations. And so I think to that end, that gives us confidence that they're going to stay with us. And we found our customer retention is very, very strong, because I think once they come in and they've used everything, they've started to pay for all of their SaaS subscriptions and everything with the cards, they become sort of our customer. And as far as are they also doing that with our competitors, some of the integrations that we'd see we'd be able to find that, right? We'd see it in the transactions, we'd see it in some of the invoicing, and that might make us take action or think a little bit differently about it.
Well, from our point of view, that's frankly a non-issue in the Marquez environment because of these linkages. In terms of your earlier point about keeping data current, we actually do that. That's part of our heavy lift. We live in that world where we're nudging the end user to say, hey, it's time to update your tax return, or your KYB is out of date, or your KYC is out of date. So we take on that lift on behalf of the end user and their counterparties, which is a huge value. That in and of itself has caused a number of players we're talking to say, I'll load my entire back book with you. If you're going to take care of that, you can have it all. And because that's something we can't do. It's too much of an administrative lift, and it's too complex, and it's too manual today, number one. And then in terms of that consolidation effect, there's two ways to think about this. There's the competitive lens where you want them to use your products, Barry, like yours, etc. We don't get in the middle of that. We don't interfere with that. In fact, we support it. But there's also the lens of the end user, and I'll use us as an example. We have two banking relationships, one with JP Morgan Chase, one with First Republic Bank. We do very different things with both. Neither one has a clue what we do with the other. Marquez allows us to bring that together. And what we've heard from institutions is, if you permit me to see the complete picture, I would do different things with you. Not just higher lines, etc., but I would do different things. And what we're hearing, particularly in this climate, is more and more enterprise users who are saying dynamic lines based on monitoring. I'll adjust the line dynamically if you let me see these things. Now, in our environment, the end user gets to say yes or no to seeing those things, particularly in the non-public space. But we also update at a much higher frequency rate, and that's prescribed by the finance organization and agreed with the end user in a pretty unique way. So that dynamic lines and things like that become a reality finally in the market, as opposed to point-in-time credit decisions.
Yeah, there's a really compelling case for as the credit risk officer. I would definitely say that the dynamic lines is a very compelling case, and I think obviously to protect us on the downside, but also to provide the upside to them, to allow them to grow without as much friction, and to be able to just not have to deal with needing a credit decision.
And I think the other thing that's where we're going and what we're seeing in the market is a move away from institutional decisioning to transaction level decisioning. So I have a $1,000 bill. Who wants to finance this for me? And because we have so much extensive and dynamic data and opt-ins, people can bid on that in the most complete and comprehensive way at a transaction You don't have to do it that way, but we think increasingly that will get automated and you'll put transactions out to bid and actually finance individual transactions rather than businesses, so there'll be decisions on transactions rather than just businesses.
That's a great point, and that, to my next question, I'm just sitting here listening to this and thinking, certainly you think that small, medium businesses, I've actually owned some small businesses in my past, and it's really, credit's really a dial, right? And it's just a short-term pain, long-term pain, and it's like, when do I use credit card, when do I use financing, when do I use, factoring, if I'm lucky enough to have that. And certainly you see, BNPL kind of creeping over into SMB as well. So, for the consumer that says, hey, I could do a BNPL thing with a fellow commerce partner, or I could possibly do, I got a credit card, I have an offer from Amex, I get 50,000 sign-up points, or I can do lending with, a lender through, my merchant services or someone more traditional. That's a lot of analysis paralysis for SMBs. And how do you feel like you fit into helping people decision the cost of credit and the use of credit? And where do you feel the responsibility lies with that?
Yeah, our answers may be different, but I think that, from Tribal's perspective, we really aim to be their financial partner. Their primary financial partner. We may not offer maybe some of the longer term debt, but certainly from a working capital and from a short term perspective, we look to be that partner. We do offer, card payment rails as well as, bank wire payment rails, and including cross border. And we're really doing some interesting stuff in the crypto space as far as cross border payments and, just the speed and the low cost that provides. We have a partnership with Stellar and their USDC integration. That's kind of exciting. It's new, but I think the idea is for them not to be shopping elsewhere. Hopefully they have what they need with us, and then just having the relationship as well, so that if they do need more, they have the relationship with us to let us know about it, so that we can try to support that.
So in our world, it's a little bit different, but complementary to what Barry said. So in our world, we have this notion of badging, where an institution like Tribal might badge a customer and actually sponsor them on the Marquez platform. We have a simple business model. It's $49.99 a month. It's not complicated, it's cheap. But most institutions we've spoken to have said, I'll sponsor my clients so that I can badge them and keep them as mine. So that they're kind of off the table for others. Now, from a competition law point of view, we can't restrict someone from moving from institution to institution. So if tomorrow Wells Fargo wants to get that client, or that client wants to go work with Wells, they can effectively buy themselves out of that subscription and move to another, much like we do with the phone companies, between Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, et cetera, et cetera. So it's competition law friendly. But the idea is to equip the end user to get the best possible activities and to help institutions fine-tune their offerings. So if you see that you're losing customers over a particular solution or particular product, you can adjust and hopefully provide that in a better way to your customers. So we're not in the business of pulling people away from one to another, or disintermediating or any of that sort of stuff, but equipping them with the tools they need. One of the things that we like a lot in our environment is for people to be able to link multiple accounts together and maximize their spending power. The truth of the matter is small businesses do not have their money neatly in one place. They use personal credit cards, they use borrowed money, they pay late, they do all sorts of weird, wonderful stuff, as we all know. In this room, anyone who's dealt with small businesses, and they've never had a singular facility where they can consolidate all of that. So, little short story in history, if I may. Back in 2008, we were doing a silly little project with a UK headquartered bank that was designed to allow people to consolidate multiple sources of funding. And it researched off the charts. Crazy interest in this thing before iPhones were a big deal, whatever. And the model was very simply, transact away, and then, within a 24-hour window, drag and drop the transactions to preferred funding source. That was interesting. We couldn't do it at the time because we didn't have host card emulation, and we didn't have a lot of the rules that we have today that would allow these things to happen. And then there was the whole problem with double interchange and blah, blah, blah. The interesting request that came, and again, I think this is poorly served today, really poorly served, is people said, this is all great, and we pay quite a lot of money for this service. But the one key thing they said is, look, I don't know what the best way to pay this bill is. You guys know, you're in the business, tell me what the best way to pay is. So we are moving towards a model of having people declare what matters most to them and running a series of simulations to show them what that could look like. So this $1,000 bill, pay, $100 off it off this card, do this, do this, do this. We won't do that. We'll have, the primary financial sponsor do that. But that is an unmet need in the market today. The best way to pay. It sounds stupid and simple. It is not well addressed.
That's actually a very valid point. I know just in my analytics when I was doing with Square Capital, we found a lot of people that didn't understand how to save for taxes and repairs and maintenance or expansions, and they didn't know how credit functioned, and they could actually save for these things. I mean, we put some saving roundups and whatever for them. But certainly, as you think about that, like the education piece of the best use of credit, and this even understanding, was the cost of credit worth it?
Yeah.
Obviously, financial leverage is a great way to build a business, but it's also bad if you don't have, you're growing it, you're shrinking at some time you use debt. How do you feel about educating people about, the choices of the credit and the responsibility that bears when people are coming to you to help them consolidate their data and or get credit? Where does responsibility fall, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think a huge advocate of that. I think, our intention is to really democratize, finance for small business particularly. I think our particular philosophy is not a, kind of a high price model. So our cost of credit is in many cases free, otherwise, very low. And I think, obviously that's attractive to them, and, continuing to offer resources. There's some content that gets generated. There's, community, tribal community that we really try to build to help support our customers in a lot of ways, including, education around credit.
I think education is critical. That's why in our platform, if you go on and have a look, there's a resource center there that's designed specifically to help educate you on these key topics. And we invite a lot of partners to actually provide some of that education in the resource center. It's free. And you get to access that. We think that education is very important, and we really do have to find a way to break the nexus between it's my customer, don't talk to them, versus educating them and equipping them in the best possible way, and then providing the best possible products for those customers.
And that's the impetus behind open banking, right?
Yeah.
It's transparency,
Yeah.
and the customer wins, and
Yeah.
forces us to do better.
Yeah.
And the sad thing about creating open banking, open credit, API-driven everything, and self-service is fraud.
Yeah.
We've all suffered for that and had to deal with that, and no good deed goes unpunished. How do you deal with making sure that obviously you're for payments especially, synthetic fraud? Some comes in, creates a synthetic business, smash and grab, there goes the money, and it's on someone else's identity. How do you feel about how you deal with making sure fraud is limited and that you're keeping people safe?
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be a threat in credit. I think the question was around the emerging markets, and certainly we've had some. Although I think the tools that we've put in place have been quite effective, and those tools are again always evolving. We have partners that offer us some solutions as well as other verifications, and so I think it's something that you just have to continuously manage. We haven't had many instances of customers being negatively impacted, although I think we would, from a company perspective, always make sure that they don't take the hit themselves, especially if it was on our platform. But it's just, it's always something, the criminals and the innovators are, kind of competing with each other along the lines. I think it'll always be that way. But there's some really interesting stuff out there, and some stuff that we put in place that have made it essentially a non-factor for us so far.
So, in the early days of Marquez, we were drowning in stories of not just synthetics, but people who said, I paid the guy $5,000 to fix my air conditioner, and he disappeared. He changed his phone number, nowhere to be found. I didn't have the expense. I didn't have the money to go chase it. I couldn't. It happens really a lot. So the cost of end user fraud, equally, not just institutional fraud, but on the other side, end user fraud is really, really high. And that's why in the Marquez world, we created this model of claim your business. You don't come sign up. You can't put a synthetic into Marquez. You have to come claim an existing record with very detailed information around it, part one. And then part two, you have to come and authenticate yourself as the legitimate owner of that business. And then only when we complete those two things is that record a legitimate record. And that's why we're so excited about this Meet Your Marquez. So I see a business on the directory. I want to do business with them, but I don't know them from Adam, so I invite them onto the platform. That way I know that the same level of verification I've gone through, they've gone through. Now we can fall in love, do business, and no one gets hurt.
Excellent. So I know we're coming up on open questions time, and we've had a pretty ranging discussion here in the last half hour. Tell me a little bit about last thoughts around the future of where things should go and what you would like to see with both of your approaches to this.
Yeah, the answer may actually be the same in this case. I think there's so many things becoming available that are going to improve the environment. More along the themes of just transparency. There's just more ways for information to be shared between trusted parties. And I think that there's a lot of people with single solutions, and that's going to be something that the industry has to kind of work through. And there's going to be some very clever innovations where people kind of take care of that for you, and you get a much more kind of streamlined process. But I think the idea is that we do a better job of risk management. We drive down the prices. It's better for the customers. The customers grow their businesses, which is better for the economy, and repeat. So I think there's a lot of good to be had. I think with all the innovations that are out there, in the fintech space, particularly for small businesses.
I agree with everything that Barry has said. Actually, the only small thing I'd add is we have to get over this notion of my customer and the wall around them that prohibits them from doing better business in everything else that they do. So. Financial institutions, I think, are maturing a little, where they've said to us, there's data that I'm happy to contribute on behalf of my customers into the Marquez environment because it makes my customers' life easier. There's data that I'd sort of like to be asked about on a case-by-case basis because it's a little on the edge. And there's data that we really wouldn't like to see the light of day because it's so proprietary, associated with us and our customers. That's an evolutionary step, I think, until we get to these trust-based relationships, as Barry was saying, in business, because we think those relationships drive out those expenses, those overheads, those losses out of the market, and just improve the efficiency of what's available and how people do business with each other. So we're big, but we've always said, and this was very unpopular with some people we spoke to, we've said we're not in the business of suppressing bad news. We won't help you hide your bad news or your bad credit or your bad whatever, but we will help you fix it if you're genuine.
That's fantastic. So I think we have about 5 minutes left on the panel, and I see we have some questions that are rolling in, and unfortunately my glasses are in my bag over there. So,
I can,
Barry, take it away.
Luckily I've got it on my app as well.
Let's see, there was one kind of around Web3, crypto, blockchain, the way we operate. So I think, Tribal very much has, kind of a crypto strategy. There's a few areas, one I already mentioned, which is the cross-border payments and the low-cost, low-friction way to do that. And then similarly, there's other things out there around just liquidity, as far as available liquidity. And then probably another one that's very compelling for us is from a rewards standpoint. So, Tribal has its own token, and we'll be integrating that into our reward strategy that will provide, both, rich benefits for our customers, but also a way to lower our costs.
We take a universal approach to integrating and consolidating sources of value. So we actually don't talk about payments, we talk about sources of value, whether that's points, crypto or not, etc. And also big believers in rewarding people for their good behavior and good activity in the market. And equally importantly, helping them unlock the long history as an industry we've all had of giving people rewards. And I'm thrilled to hear what Barry says about rewards that we hope they don't use. $20 billion a year in the United States alone gets flushed down the toilet in unused rewards. That's not good business.
No, not at all.
I'll ask the next one. Is Marquez planning to offer aggregate SMB loans?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, we're in discussion with a number of partners. Right now, we actually signed a deal this week that isn't publicly announced yet that will actually do exactly that.
There's one more left.
Okay, so I think maybe the first one we already addressed. So another Marquez. So you say Marquez can clean up data. How do you corroborate that the cleanup is verifiable and not manipulated? I think we talked about this one a little bit. And how is that different from self-provisioned data with Dun Bradstreet's credit bureau?
Great. So we went through the DMB world-based line by line before we started Marquez, and we dismissed an awful lot of it for the very reasons you're asking, number one. Number two, our philosophy with data is very simply this. We will rank and score the data in terms of its integrity for you. So we do our own deduping, matching, cleaning, scrubbing, verification, etc. But we will literally score it for you and say this is data that's corroborated and verified. This is data that is end user provided, and we can't corroborate it, but we'll let you know that. Where we're going with this, interestingly, is a new type of bureau facility that will verify data to source. So we already know how to get data in without it being tampered with on the way in. We already do that. I mentioned to you earlier today, we run individual keys on each data artifact, so we can protect it, very much that way. But where we're going in our next iteration is to actually verify it to source. So this is Barry's business's tax return. It came to us securely, but it's also the tax return that was filed with the IRS, so we can corroborate it. That'll be the 100%, the high watermark, and then we'll rank everything below that.
Great.
I think we've hit the others. So.
Yep, and I think we have about a minute and 25 seconds left for any other questions. All right, well, thank you, gentlemen, so much for the time. Thanks for everyone who attended today, and thank you for attending. Thanks.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.